Good morning. Yes, Ms. Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honour. This is the inquiry into the cause and origin of the Berry fire in the Bega Valley local government area encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people. Your Honour, this fire burned largely in dense bushland within the Wadbilliga National Park in an area known as Yankees Gap. The fire was named as such due to its proximity to the Berry Mountain. The area is set between the townships of Bamboka and Steeple Flat. It is approximately 33 kilometres northwest of Bega, 12 kilometres north of Bamboka and 45 kilometres southeast of Cooma. The following map will show an indication of this location. Your Honour will see in the top left-hand corner the words Berry and also Yankees Creek, and then the red dot slightly also to the left. That's the general area of what the evidence will show will be the origin of the fire. Your Honour will see to the top right we have Verona and Quorma, two towns that were hit hard by the Badger Forest fire, and down in the bottom right, Bega. Your Honour, the Berry fire burned for 28 days before it merged with the Badger Forest fire. This fire burnt through approximately 27,000 hectares. During this period, the fire damaged a total of 148 structures, including 24 residences. There was no loss of life from this fire. The evidence will show that over the following day, that is the 30th of December, the fire spread 14 to 18 kilometres to the southeast. This was considered extreme and anomalous fire behaviour. I'll show Your Honour the first fire progression map for Berry. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner the black oval. That's the first day of Berry. And Your Honour will also see, for context, the development of the Badger Forest fire to the north. This was the day of the tragic spread of the fire that was responsible for the many deaths Your Honour heard about last week. Over the following week, the fire continued to spread at a steady rate, generally towards the northeast and northwest. By the 13th of January 2020, this fire had spread approximately 8 to 9 kilometres to the northwest, again considered extreme and anomalous fire behaviour. At this point, it coalesced or merged in part with the Badger Forest fire. Your Honour will see the extraordinary development of both the Berry fire in that 12 or 13 days and the Badger Forest fire. This is the fire progression map from the 13th of January. Your Honour will see how these two fires have in part merged. From this point on, that is the 13th of January, the footprint of the Berry fire only marginally increased. The final progression map, that is of the 25th of January, is recorded by the RFS as documenting the fire as out or amalgamated, because it is on this day that the northern front of the fire burnt into the southern aspect of the Badger Forest fire. And for completeness, I'll show Your Honour that final fire progression map. Your Honour will see the extent of the Berry fire on that day, and that's the final progression map that was prepared by the RFS. Your Honour, the court today will hear from the officer in charge of this fire investigation, Detective Glenn Bradley, in regard to the investigation by him into the cause, origin and progression of the fire. The court will then hear evidence that the fire was first observed by the RFS from a helicopter. The RFS helicopter crewman, Jake Rorty, will give evidence in this regard, and the court will see his photographs of a small plume of smoke at the area of origin taken by him at 4:57 p.m. on the 29th of December. The court will then hear from John Inschip, RFS captain of the Bamboka Brigade. He will give evidence to the court about when he first was alerted to the Werryberry fire and the progression over the first few days of the fire, and importantly on the 31st. Your Honour, the court will then hear from two fire experts. Firstly, Detective Senior Sergeant Gregory Moon from the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command, or FETS, in New South Wales Police, in regard to his opinion on the cause and origin of the fire. The court will then hear from the final witness, Darren Howe, an RFS fire investigator, in regard to his opinion as to the cause and origin of the fire. Your Honour will hear that both of these experts are of the view that the fire started from lightning. The likely origin of the fire will be explored further in their evidence. Your Honour, the brief of evidence in regard to the Werryberry fire has already been provided to you in the hard drive at the commencement of last week's proceedings, but I formally tender that in this inquiry. I also note, Your Honour, for the record, that the brief now contains Exhibit 10A, which is some lightning strike data that has been referred to in some of the material, but it's not actually in evidence. That document has been served on the parties in these proceedings.
Thank you. So the Werryberry brief, Exhibit 10.
Thank you, Your Honour.
And the lightning strike data, 10A.
Thank you. Your Honour, I call the officer in charge, Glenn Bradley.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Thank you, Detective. Have a seat.
So will you give your full name to the court
Glenn Bradley,
and your occupation?
Detective Senior Constable, New South Wales Police.
How long have you been a police officer for?
15 years.
Were you appointed as the officer in charge of a number of fires in regard to the Black Summer bushfire season of 2019-2020?
Yes, I was.
You gave evidence in this court in regard to the Badger Forest fire last week.
I did.
Can you remind the court what unit you were in at the time of that investigation?
I was in the Financial Crime Squad Arson Unit.
And how long had you been in that unit for?
In total, about 6 years.
And as part of your investigations into these fires, did you put together a team of police to help you in your role as the officer in charge?
Yes.
And how many people formed that team?
In the Arson Unit, there was 6 Detective Senior Constables, a supervisor and an investigation coordinator, as well as local police at the southern region.
And Senior Constable, in regard to the investigation of this fire, have you prepared a statement for these proceedings?
Yes, I have.
And, Your Honour, for your benefit, that is tab 2 of the Werryberry brief. Senior Constable, did you swear that statement on the 28th of June 2021?
Yeah, I created it on the 28th. I signed it on the 30th of June.
Sorry, signed on the 30th.
Yes, that's right.
I'd like to start by asking you some questions about the area and the geography of the Werryberry fire.
Yes.
We'll start with the map, and I'll refer on page 4 of your statement. Now, what's that red dot on the screen?
That's a place just west of the Werryberry Mountain. So the green dot is Werryberry Mountain. That red dot is just taken from Google Maps of Werryberry region.
And is this the region that you consider to be the general origin of the fire?
Yes, that's right.
In your statement, I'll just read out the proximity of the area. Approximately 10 kilometres north of the Snowy Mountains Highway, between the townships of Bemboka and Steeple Flat, is a mountain peak known as Werryberry. Now, you've just identified that, is that
Yes,
right?
that's right, yep.
It's described as an elevation standing high above the surrounding area with small summit area, steep slopes and local relief of 30 metres or more. It is densely occupied by rugged bushland and undulating country, making access to and from the mountain very difficult. Now, you've been out to the area after the bushfires, is that right?
Yep.
And what was your experience of the terrain?
It was extremely rugged. We flew there by helicopter. We weren't able to get there by car at that particular time. Very rugged, just undulating hills and mountains, and yeah, that's how I would describe it.
And what about the access in terms of fire trails for the RFS?
Very limited, yeah, in my experience. There was some access, but not directly to where the area of origin was.
In your statement, Senior Constable, you've given some evidence about the weather conditions at the end of 2019. And as you have told the court last week, is it the case that there was a significantly elevated fire danger for that area at that time?
Yes, that's right.
And were these fire dangers driven by unusually strong westerly winds, firstly, and heat wave conditions?
Yes, that's right.
Was there also a significant contribution in terms of lack of rainfall for an extended period leading up to that summer?
That's right. We're in a drought at that stage.
I'll show you a table of the weather observations. This is at page 16. It'll come up on the screen, Senior Constable.
Yes.
This is a table in regard to the weather recorded at Cooma Airport. Is that the nearest facility to record weather in the area?
Yes.
And if I take you to the 29th, which is the day that you consider this fire started,
Yes.
is it the case that maximum temperature was 33 degrees?
That's right. Yep.
And similarly to the evidence you gave last week, is that a higher than usual temperature for that time of year?
It's not higher than usual, but it was the end of a significant run of high temperature, like leading up to that day, and zero rainfall.
If I take you, Senior Constable, to your evidence at about paragraphs 23 and 24.
Yes.
You make reference in your statement to observations by an RFS officer of smoke. Can you tell the court about when you found out about those observations?
Shortly into the investigation, we put requests into the RFS for information, and some of those were images we received. One was this image, a set of images we received from the aerial firefighting team led by Captain Jake Rorty, helicopter amp crewman. He provided images of a smoke plume in the region of the Werryberry Mountain.
And it's at about this point in your statement where you effectively agree with the experts in these proceedings, that is, this fire was started by lightning?
Yes.
Did you obtain a series of data sets from the global position and tracking system, that is the GPATS, in regard to lightning strikes in the area?
Yes.
I'll show you some satellite maps. Firstly, the one up on the screen, you can see from the heading at the top, this is a satellite image showing lightning strikes until 4 p.m. on the 29th of December.
Yes.
Is this the material that you obtained from that service?
Yes, that's right.
Did you also obtain similar satellite maps from the days before and the days after?
Correct. Yep.
And did they all show that there was significant lightning activity in the area at that time?
Yeah, very much so.
Just before we leave that image, I should have asked you, the red dot on the screen, what does that signify?
It signifies the believed area of origin of the fire, Berry fire.
So is that the mapped coordinates of the location of the plume of smoke that was observed by the RFS officer Rorty?
Exactly. Yes.
I'll turn to another similar image, Senior Constable, and that is the following day, that is from 4 p.m. on the 29th until 4 p.m. on the 30th of December. Again, this shows in the blue a number of the lightning strikes mapped. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
And again, what does that red dot signify?
It's the same coordinates of the plume of smoke from Jake Rorty.
Now, once you were tasked to undertake examinations of the cause and origin of this fire, did you actually attend the area yourself?
By air, yes. We never got on the ground.
In your statement, if I take you, Senior Constable, to paragraph 33,
Yes?
this is the part of the statement where you catalogue your investigations into the cause and origin of the fire.
Yes.
And looking at that now, is it the case that it was actually the RFS that undertook their investigation first in time, and then you, as the New South Wales Police, did so?
Yes, that's right.
We might deal with the RFS investigation first.
Yep.
So were you present for that?
For the RFS one, yes. I was.
And can you tell the court how that occurred?
So, Investigator Darren Howe from the RFS met us at Merimbula Airport, and we boarded a RFS helicopter.
And who was us, I'm sorry?
So it was Detective Senior Constable Ben Waldron, myself, and Darren Howe.
And was there still fire activity in the area at that time?
Yeah, well, yes, there was. Werribee had merged with Badger by then, but there were other fires that were still burning in the region.
So once you boarded the helicopter, where did you go?
We flew to the general region of the Werribee Mountain, and Mr. Howe conducted his investigations from the air.
And is it the case that you weren't in a position to land the helicopter on that day?
Yes.
And conduct any examinations on the ground?
Yes, that's right.
I'll show you some photographs from that aerial examination. Firstly, on page 25.
Yes.
This is an extract from your statement, Senior Constable, at paragraph 35. So there's two photographs there.
Yes.
In your statement, you refer to that as two separate photographs of tree number 1.
Yes,
Were they photographs taken by Darren Howe from the air?
exactly right, yes.
And to your eye, had they likely or at least possibly been struck by lightning?
Yes, and that's what Darren Howe explained to me, yes.
I'll show you a second set of pictures, which is on the following page, of what you've referred to as tree number 2.
Yes,
Were they also taken by Darren Howe from the air at that time?
they were, yeah.
And following that examination, is it the case that Darren Howe prepared a report and then that was provided to you at some point later?
Yes, that's right.
I'll turn now to your investigation, and that is the New South Wales Police investigation of the fire.
Yes.
And that starts from paragraph 38 of your statement. So who undertook that investigation?
Detective Senior Sergeant Greg Moon and Senior Constable Shannon Murray Swan from...
So were you there on that day?
No, I didn't attend. Another one of my colleagues, Detective Senior Constable Jeff Horn, attended with them.
And Senior Sergeant Moon, he prepared a report for these proceedings in regard to his opinion as to the cause and origin of the fire.
That's right.
And was that team in a position to get on the ground and examine the area?
They were, yes.
And they went to the area on the 26th of February, that is some weeks after the RFS did?
That's right, yep.
And is it your understanding that at the time of Senior Sergeant Moon's analysis, he located some of that lightning data and mapped it to the area consistent with where the plume of smoke was?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Your Honour, I'll just pause there and say that's the data at Exhibit 10A that we will take Your Honour to in due course.
Thank you.
Is it your understanding, Senior Constable, that when that team was on the ground, they were in a position to inspect those trees, that is tree 1 and 2?
Yes.
Just show you those photographs. Page 28 is the first one. Is it your understanding that that's a photo from the ground of what we referred to earlier as tree number 1?
Yes, that's right.
And then the second photograph, is it also your understanding that's just an image from a different angle of that same tree?
Yes, that's right, yep.
In your statement, Senior Constable, you summarised Senior Sergeant Moon's opinion. Is it the case that having seen both of those reports, you remain of the view that this fire was started by a lightning strike in the area of the plume of smoke?
Yes, that's right, yep.
I'd like to turn now to the fire progression and the amalgamation of the fire. Now, you deal with that some pages further along in your statement. And if I take you to paragraph 49, you've created a table of a number of various fires
Yes.
in the far southern region. I'll pull up that table, please. It goes over 2 pages. So that's the first. We might just return to the first page, please. So this has 3 fires at the top of the table in terms of the name. And have you documented the period in which they burnt? And then you've given them a reference number and then the total area in terms of hectares.
Yes, that's right.
So the Badger Forest Road fire is the first table, and as we've said, you informed Her Honour about that last week.
Right.
And if we turn to the next page at the top of that table, the first item is the Werryberry fire. Now, you've given evidence about that time period and it ending on the 25th of January 2020. Can you explain to the court your understanding of how the RFS names, firstly, and then catalogues the fires?
Yes. So my understanding is that once an ignition is identified by the RFS, they issue a name localised to that ignition point. Obviously, when there's a significant number of fires, it's easier to categorise them by a specific area of origin. In this case, it was Werryberry Mountain. It was given the Werryberry fire name. The number you see in the third column there, beginning 191, that's a reference to the system called ICON, the RFS use. Every fire is given a unique number in ICON, and it's their number as they issue.
And what's your experience in terms of whether or not the naming of a fire changes in certain circumstances?
Yes, so as I said, the RFS name fires at the time of ignition. If that fire then crosses an LGA, a local government area boundary, it's then issued another name because it's managed by a separate fire control centre. So there's examples throughout the southern region where a fire moved past an LGA border and it was given a separate name.
And this fire, that is the Werryberry fire, started in the Bega Valley local government area.
Yes.
And did it move into a different LGA?
No, Werryberry did not, no.
But some of the other fires in the far southern region, they did in fact effectively jump LGAs.
Yes, that's right.
And your understanding is in those circumstances, the RFS might rename that fire with a different title.
Yes, correct.
And do you have any experience about if and when that occurs, if a fire jumps a state boundary?
Again, it's given a different name. You'll hear evidence later on the hearings for a different fire, the border fire, started in Victoria, and they're a different name called the Banana Track Fire.
Yes.
Once it crossed the border into New South Wales, it became Border Fire and Rockton Fire because it's different LGAs in New South Wales.
Thank you, Senior Constable. Now, as you said earlier, this fire was considered to be out because it amalgamated.
Yes.
That was after 28 days. Given you were the officer in charge for both fires, did you simply continue to manage the investigation of the fire under the umbrella of the Badger Forest fire?
No, quite separate. Because the damage attributed to both fires was recorded separately by authorities, it was managed separately. As much as I could, anyway.
I'll show you a table of the destruction that's caused by the Werryberry fire, and that's at page 62. So this table records a total of 148 affected properties from the Werryberry fire, and that includes 24 residences. So at what point in time were those numbers calculated?
Sometime after the fire was extinguished, I think even after all the fires were extinguished, a government agency tallied the destroyed and damaged properties afterwards. I can't give you an exact date because it was over a long time period to cover the whole area.
Is it the case that it's not you as a member of the New South Wales Police who's collating those numbers? It's a different agency?
Yes.
And they're provided to you as the officer in charge?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Your Honour, those are my questions of this witness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Stevens. I'll just check if there's any questions for you, Detective. Mr Free.
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you. Mr Glascott.
Likewise, no questions. Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you. Thank you, Detective.
Thank you, Ms.
Ms Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honour. I call Jake Rorty.
Mr Rorty, can you see and hear us? Mr Rorty, can you see and hear us?
Sorry, Your Honour, we understand he is there. We might just make a brief inquiry. Mr Rorty, can you hear us in the court? Mr Rorty, can you hear us? I'm told he's here, Your Honour. It'll just be a moment.
Mr Rorty, can you see and hear us?
Your Honour, I can see on the screen he has joined. Mr Rorty, can you hear us? You may have your microphone muted. Your Honour, I'm sorry, I can't assist you. We may have to have a short break to try and work this out.
One last try. Mr Rorty, can you see and hear us? That's LG, is it?
It is under that name of LG. I understand that he's here. There may be a connection problem.
All right. I'll just take a short adjournment for a couple of minutes, just
Thank you.
to sort it out.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Currently, that figure is at 78.5%.
Hi. Hello.
Silence, please, all stand. Current Scott has assumed.
Ms Stevens, I understand we're still having some technical difficulties.
We have some ongoing problems connecting to these remote witnesses, Your Honour.
Yes.
Can I suggest that, Your Honour, take the morning adjournment, we can resolve them and then attempt to hear from all of the witnesses consecutively?
Hear from them.
From them, we should have them all ready to go after the morning adjournment.
All right, so will 11:30 be enough time, do you think, if we come back now?
If Your Honour could perhaps make it 11:40.
11:40.
Thank you.
All right, we'll adjourn until 11:40.
Silence, please, all stand. Current Scott's temporary adjourned.
No, we just want Dave to know about calling.
Yes, Ms Stevens.
Thank you for that time, Your Honour. I call Jake Rorty.
Mr Rorty, can you see and hear us?
Certainly can.
Excellent, thank you. We'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr. Rorty, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
The oath.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Sir, will you give your full name to the court, please?
Jake John Michael Rorty.
And are you a member of the RFS?
I am.
And which brigade are you attached to?
I'm attached to the East Jindabyne Rural Fire Brigade and also the captain of the Monero Remote Area Firefighting Team.
And was that the case as at December 2019?
Yes, it was.
Mr. Rorty, have you provided a statement to investigating police in regard to the Black Summer bushfires?
I have.
And do you have that statement in front of you?
I do.
And did you sign that statement on the 9th of December 2020?
I did.
As at the 29th of December 2019, can you tell the court what your tasks for the day were?
Yeah, so we were tasked as a Rapid Aerial Response Team, or RART team for short, which is a state organised asset based out of Jindabyne on that day. It was myself, a helicopter pilot, a crew member for the helicopter company, and then also two of my remote area team. So 3 of us and 2 helicopter crewmen. We were tasked originally to do a fire down in the pilot area of southern New South Wales. From there, we completed our tasking alongside National Parks and Wildlife Service. We headed north to what was reported as a possible spot fire from the Badger, which turned out to be the Good Fire, or known as the Good Fire. We did some tasking there, which we switched to aerial search and rescue. From there, once our tasking was completed there, we moved to a spot fire on the Badger Fire, determined that we were unable to assist, and then we were tasked to follow a band of lightning that was heading down the Kybian Ranges and Wadbilliga National Park.
Thank you. I'll just stop you there, Mr. Rorty. So to summarise your evidence, you were working in the air that morning in regard to 2 existing fires. Is that the case? Badger and Good?
We were working one existing fire at the time, and then got called to a new ignition, which was known eventually as the Good Fire. Then we were also tasked to investigate a spot fire of the existing Badger Fire.
And when you say there was a band of lightning, can you indicate to the court around about where that was, or where you understood it was?
Yeah, so from what I understood, it was coming through in a southeasterly direction through the Kybian Ranges, in through the Wadbilliga National Park, as indicated by the lightning image you showed earlier in the proceedings.
Can you tell the court around about where you were, where you first saw what we now know is a plume of smoke that was likely the origin of the Werryberry fire?
Yeah, so we were heading down between the Dandenong Nature Reserve and the Wadbilliga National Park down the Chiros Valley when we first spotted it. So we were in a westerly aspect of the column of smoke that we spotted.
So at that point in time, you were actually undertaking exactly that task, that is, looking for spot fires as a result of that lightning band?
That's correct.
And when you saw that plume of smoke, did you descend upon it, and then what?
So yeah, we descended upon it, had a aerial reconnaissance of it. So when we do find these spot fires, we do an aerial reconnaissance or a couple of what we call orbits, where the machine goes around the spot, where we have eyes both on the fire that we found, but also in the perimeter to make sure that there's no other ignitions. From there, we took some photos and discussed as a crew how we were going to deal with the fire at the time.
I'll just show you 3 photographs. I'll show you them in sequence, Mr. Rorty, and then I'll ask you to explain each one of them.
Sure.
So, firstly, this is a photograph that's at page 158 of the brief, and there's some reflection from the window. Can you see that photograph?
Yes, I can.
I'll now show you the second photograph, which is at page 159, which is slightly closer up. And you can see a plume of smoke. Can you see that?
Can.
And then the third and final photograph is a similar photograph, but from a slightly different angle.
Yes, that's correct.
If we go back to the first photograph, please. Can I ask you to explain to the court what was happening as at the time you took this photograph, and also explain how you identify exactly where you are in space?
So that photograph was taken as we were approaching the fire. So we had spotted the fire, as I mentioned. We were in basically a directly westerly direction from the fire. From there, the pilot navigated through. As you can see, the terrain there is mountainous and has a number of valleys. So we tracked a valley to the south of that. So from that photo, we're looking in roughly a north-northwest direction towards it. And that was our on one of our orbits to make sure that there was no other spot fires in the time. So the way that we work out where we are in the air there, you can see in the top center of that photograph is our latitude and longitude location. And then in the top left-hand corner is the direction. So that direction is the direction in a 360-degree view from myself, with 0 degrees being due north.
And what kind of camera are you using to take these photographs?
This is on my personal mobile phone using an application called Context Cam.
So is it the case that the image records those GPS coordinates when you take the photograph?
That's correct. So it geolocates where you're taking the photo from. You can see in the top right-hand corner, it does have an accuracy based on your GPS. And then it shows you the direction that the camera is pointing.
So does this photograph fairly accurately represent when you first saw the plume of smoke?
No, it doesn't. This photograph represents when we came into a range where a photograph would have done justice to be able to show the plume of smoke itself.
Can you give the court an impression of the country in that national park and how difficult it is to access by road?
Yeah, so the country itself is extremely rugged. There was a fire in that area the year before, which I was involved in, the Yankees Gap fire, which was extremely difficult to navigate through. The nearest fire trails to the location that we had were over 4 kilometres away, and over various terrain, including creeks and mountains, as you can see, ridgelines, etc. It's dense bushland with both scrub and heavy crown.
Thank you. I'll turn to the second and then the third photographs. Can you explain in similar terms the context of those 2 photographs?
Certainly. So these photographs were taken as best we could be hovering above the fire itself. As you can see there, it is a single plume of smoke, which we observed was from a single tree. The GPS coordinates there in the top centre of the screen would be as close as we could have recorded an accurate indication of where this fire was located at the time that we'd found it. And the direction again in the top left-hand corner is the direction that the phone is pointing. However, as I mentioned, we're pretty much directly above the fire.
And if you turn to the third photograph, Mr. Rorty, it's probably the best example of that plume of smoke. How is it that you know that it's coming from a single tree as opposed to more than one?
So when the photo itself will only give you so much. We did lower considerably more closer to the top of the trees there and had multiple views of this fire. I think from memory and discussing with my crew, I believe we did about 9 orbits of this fire. So we did have plenty of time to observe its behaviour.
So were you reasonably confident that it was in fact a plume of smoke coming from a single tree?
Yes.
And once you'd taken those photos, where did you and your crew then go?
So from there, we discussed in the air about possible actions that we could take to rectify the situation. Our pilot informed us that due to the nature of the helicopter we were using, that we were very limited in the amount of fuel that we had. So we, from there, proceeded to Merimbula Airport to refuel and finalise our plans.
And what process is undertaken by you or your crew in terms of reporting that fire to the RFS?
So as mentioned before, we're a state asset when we're a rapid area response team. So I answer directly to Special Operations in Sydney. So my process from there was to get in touch with them via mobile phone. We reported the fire, reported its location, and from there I was assured that they had then informed the local fire control centre. Thank you,
Mr. Rorty. Your Honour, those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rorty, there may be some other questions. Mr. Glascott.
I have no questions. Thank you, Your Honour.
And Mr. Free.
No questions, Your Honour. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Rorty. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you, Your Honour. The next witness is RFS member John Inschip.
Mr. Inschip, can you see and hear us?
I can, yes.
Thank you. We'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr. Inschip, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
Well, the oath will do.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
So will you give your full name to the court, please?
John Joseph Inschip.
Can you see us, Mr. Inschip?
I can, yes.
At this point, we can't see you. If I ask you to just repeat your name, perhaps a little louder, it should ensure that your face comes up on the screen.
John Joseph Inschip.
Thank you. Can you still see us?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Inschip, I'm going to ask you some questions about the Black Summer bushfires of 2019-2020. Did you give a statement to investigating police in that regard, signed 10 February 2020?
I did, yes. I have it in front of me.
Can you tell the court which crew were you attached to as at that time?
Of the Bamboka Royal Fire Service Brigade.
And is that still the case?
That's correct, yes.
If I ask you to take your mind back to the end of December 2019, on the 28th and 29th of December, were you working in regard to these emerging bushfires?
I was, yes.
Can you tell the court when you first became aware of the start of what has been called the Werryberry fire?
I was at home that particular day, and I received a phone call from the landholder, and so I rang a few of the brigade members, and we went to investigate. And once we were on as close as we could get, we determined that we couldn't do anything because the fire was inaccessible country from where we were.
When you say you got a call from the, I think you said landowner, is that what you said?
That's correct, yes.
In your statement, if I just take you to paragraph 5, you've told police, about 2:30 p.m. on the 30th of December, I received a phone call from the property owner of a farm called Crystal Brook. Is that the landowner that you're talking about?
That's correct, yes.
So you knew about the fire as at about 2:30 on the 30th of December. Did you know there was such a fire before that call, or was that when you first heard of it?
No, I think the day before we could see smoke. So we were.
You could see smoke?
Yes.
And where were you at that time?
I was at home, my residence.
Do you remember if that smoke was in the morning or the afternoon?
I think it was in the afternoon.
But is your evidence that it's not until the following afternoon, that is around about 2:30, that you actually were tasked to take some action in regard to that fire?
Yeah, that's correct, because you could see it was inaccessible country, so there was nothing we could do at that particular point in time.
Can you explain from your experience, Mr. Inschip, why and how it was inaccessible?
We were on the bottom of the mountain. The fire was up over the top, and we couldn't even see. All we could see was the smoke. We couldn't see anything else. And to get to that fire, to get to that fire, you would have to go right round the highway up to top of the mountain, and I'm not real sure the fire trails up there.
When you received the call from the landowner of Crystal Brook, did you assemble your team at the Bemboka fire shed?
That's correct. I made a few phone calls, and we got a few members, and we met at the fire station.
And what's the approximate distance between the Bemboka fire shed and what you understood to be the smoke that was emanating from this fire?
It would have to be in a straight line, probably 12 kilometres, I would say.
And did you then attend the property of Crystal Brook?
We did. We drove as close as we could to the tree line at the bottom of the mountain, and that's as far as we could go.
So is it fair to summarise by saying that in the afternoon of the 30th, you weren't able to access the fire because it was still up in the mountain? You were effectively waiting for it to come into open country.
That's correct. All we could do was wait for the fire to come to us.
And when did it first come to you, so to speak?
I think it was, let's check my notes here. I think it might have been the 30th.
Did it descend down in or around that property?
No, not at that stage. It actually come out further to the east of Crystal Brook property in an area called Yankee Gap.
And can you explain to the court what is meant by the term Yankees Gap? We can see it on the map, but it might be useful for you to explain that to the court.
It's just it's a road name. It's an area of just a locality, a name of an area north of Bemboka. There's no actual township, it's just an area.
So did you then attend the area that is known as Yankees Gap and commence fire efforts?
We did, there was quite a number of spot fires, and we just went into protecting property at that stage.
How many other crews were there with you at that time?
Bamboka Brigade has got 3 vehicles, and all 3 vehicles attended that area.
And for how long did you continue to fight that fire?
We were there for probably a day longer with crew changes.
And can you explain to the court, from your own observations, the conditions of the fire at that time? And I mean, how fast it was progressing, and anything else you think is useful to distinguish the fire?
Yeah, on that day it was quite hot, quite windy, and as soon as spot fires were starting, they were spreading very rapidly, and we just couldn't keep up with putting them all. As we put them out, more and more were starting.
Is it your understanding that that fire, that is the Werryberry fire, continued to burn for some weeks and then it ultimately coalesced with the Badger fire?
That's correct. Yes, it did. Yes.
And did you play a role in fighting that particular fire over those coming weeks?
I was there for the duration of that fire. Yes.
Thank you, Your Honour. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Ms Stevens. I'll just see if there's any questions from Mr Free.
No, Your Honour, thank you.
Mr Glascott.
No, thank you, Your Honour.
Thanks very much, Mr Inschip. You're excused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. I'll call the first of the 2 experts in regard to this fire, and that is Gregory Moon.
Mr Moon, can you see and hear us? You there, Detective?
It's not there. I'm told he hasn't joined yet, Your Honour, though he's certainly... Oh, he is connected now. Perhaps... Detective Moon, are you there?
Yes.
We can see you, Detective Moon. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes. The court officer, if we just ask him to take the oath of the affirmation.
Detective Moon, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath for the affirmation?
The oath's fine.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Thank you, Ms Stevens.
So will you give your full name to the court, please?
It's Gregory John Moon.
Can you just give, sir, your rank and station for the purposes of the record?
Yes, I'm a Detective Senior Sergeant of Police. I'm attached to the Wollongong Crime Scene Section, which is part of the Forensic Evidence and Technology Services branch.
Detective, have you provided a report in these proceedings in regard to the cause and origin of the Werryberry fire?
Yes, that's correct.
Have you got a copy of that report in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Can you outline for the court, please, your qualifications and experience in regard to fire investigation?
Yes, I've completed a number of courses in relation to wildfire and structural fire courses. These commenced back in 1997 when I undertook the initial wildfire course. I've attended multiple
scenes of wildfires and bushfires in excess of 50 over my career. I've also attended to over 1,000 property damages where contributing factors of fire spread is taken into account. I've also attended in excess of 250 to 300 structural fire courses for the purpose of cause and origin and determination.
Thank you. Detective, we've heard this morning from the officer in charge that you and another police officer, Senior Constable Shannon Murphy-Swan, attended the area that you consider to be the origin of the Werryberry fire on the 26th of February 2020, is that right?
Yes, we attended an area where a number of locations were pointed out to us in potential for lightning strikes.
If I turn to your report, I might just clarify your opinion in regard to the cause and origin of the fire first, and then ask you a number of questions about how you've arrived at that opinion. If I take you to paragraph 10 of your report.
Yes.
Is it the case that, in your view and according to your report, the Werryberry fire started due to a lightning strike, which was recorded in the area at 1:29 p.m. on the afternoon of Sunday, 29 December 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
And you go on to say this lightning strike was recorded within 200 metres of the determined area of origin.
Yes.
Now, are you working from the premise that the photograph taken by Jack Rorty of a plume of smoke was the first recorded observations of that fire?
Yes, that's correct. That's the first observations. So then we use some other data, being lightning strike data, and potentially weather effects to determine if that was the point of origin of that fire.
In regard to the lightning strike data, if I ask you to turn to paragraph 23 of your report, I'll start by asking you, where do you obtain the lightning strike data from?
In this initial case, we obtained the data from the Rural Fire Brigade, but it comes from a company that's classed as GPATS, so it's a global positioning agency. That's raw data that we can then project onto maps to show the locations of those potential lightning strikes.
You've been provided with a document, Detective, and, Your Honour, that's the document that was marked Exhibit 10A earlier today. Have you got, it's a handful of pages, Detective Moon, and it starts with a heading, Lightning observed in the vicinity of the Werryberry fire prior to the fire being authorised as going.
Yes, I know the document
Have you
you're
got
talking about.
a copy of that bundle?
I can just pull it up if you just bear with me too a little bit.
Thank you.
Yes, I have that data now.
Now, this bundle contains a number of tables, and relevantly there's a table that's called Table 13, and the heading is Metadata for lightning strikes which occurred on 29 December and within the mapped fire shape of the Werryberry fire. And then there's a number of records of lightning strikes on that day. Can you just explain to the court, how do you extract that data and create a table such as this one?
Okay, so when you look at the two columns that are under the heading of latitude and longitude, all that data within those columns is copied into a mapping process. In this particular case, I use Google Maps. It'll then project each of those GPS coordinates onto the map itself.
I'll just show you a satellite map, Detective, and this is at page 34 of the Officer in Charge's statement. So just one moment, Detective.
Mm-hmm.
If we can just zoom in on that top satellite map, please. Detective, can you see that image?
Yes, I can.
Can you describe to the court what that image represents, and in particular the small red flag in the middle?
Okay, so all the blue little flagged areas are all those GPS data the latitude and longitude markers that are projected onto the map. And then the red flag is the GPS reading of the plume of smoke that was available from the pilots of the aircraft that first observed the smoke.
So did you create this document?
Yes, I did.
So is it the case that you have entered the GPS coordinates of where the plume of smoke was observed, and then you've also entered all the various coordinates of the recorded lightning strikes up until 4 p.m. on the 29th of December?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it a 24-hour period?
No, depends on the period can be any time. This period was just data that was available during that time. And I used 4 o'clock being that if a lightning strike created a fire, and you need a period of time before that fire will take hold. So therefore the plume of smoke was seen at nearly 5 o'clock. So it's just giving a detailed analysis of potential strikes that could cause that fire.
I'll take you to another document, and this is in the bundle 10A. This is the last satellite map in that bundle, which is at the bottom right-hand corner, page 41 of 149. Can you see that document on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Is that the same area with the same lightning strikes mapped, but they've been accorded a reference number of the particular time of the strike? We can zoom in for you, Detective.
I'm just getting. So the area in the centre of that, which is more green, light green, is the area that's getting close towards, I think, Bombala. It's just below that white hashed area. So the lightning strike data above it is the same data that I've projected it with the blue flags.
So from mapping that data according to those references, were you able to identify the actual time of particular strikes?
That's right. Each of those lightning data has a time that it has occurred.
I'll now take you back, I'm sorry to flip between documents, to the Officer in Charge's statement at page 35. We'll bring this map up on the screen for you. This is a satellite map of the same area. There's only 2 flags present, the red dot and a single blue dot. Is that red dot, again, the plume of smoke as mapped according to the GPS coordinates?
Yes, that's correct.
And then the blue flag with the distance of 200 metres, what does that represent?
That's the lightning data strike that was indicated at 1:29 p.m. on the 29th.
So if we compare this map to the one I just showed you, is it the case that this single blue dot is the strike that's closest, or that you considered to be closest to the plume of smoke?
That's correct, yes. The flag that's located to the left and a little bit lower than that one, I believe was approximately 700 metres from the plume of smoke. So we can discount that being the distance away that lightning hasn't started, the strike hasn't started that fire where the plume of smoke is.
So is it your evidence that that lightning strike that's approximately 200 metres from the plume of smoke is the most likely cause of the ignition of the fire?
Yes, that's correct. The error rate for the lightning strike from GPATs is accuracy normally between 2 to 250 metres. I think it's 95 or 98% accuracy.
We can remove that map, thank you. Now, just pausing there, when you're making an assessment of a fire area, are there other factors, that is, those other than a lightning strike, that might assist you in making a determination of the origin of a fire?
Yes, that's correct. We use a number of different areas. We will look at unintentional fires, which lightning falls underneath. We'll look at intentionally lit fires, where someone may light a particular fire as an arson. We may have unintentional fires through people camping or different effects like that. In this particular case, there was no evidence to show that area was accessible, and the only logical point for that fire starting was a lightning strike due to the inaccessibility of the location.
So you were in a position to rule out other causes other than lightning?
That's correct. There's no fire trails, there's no roads nearby, there's no tracks or walking areas into that area. So a number of those other factors can be ruled out.
Just returning to the 26th of February 2020, that is when you examined the fire area, were you in a position to actually get on the ground at that time?
We attended the ground area where a number of trees were identified potential lightning strikes through aerial observations previously. We weren't able to get to the area close to where this lightning strike was and the plume of smoke was due to the inaccessibility of that location.
I'll just show you 2 photographs of what we've called Tree 1 and Tree 2, taken from the air some weeks before your examination, and those photographs are on page 25 and 26 of the Officer in Charge's statement. So just pausing there for a moment, Detective. You're familiar with that photograph on the screen?
Yes, I am.
So that's a photograph taken by RFS fire investigator Darren Howe some weeks before your examination of the fire area. That's Tree 1.
Yes.
And then turn to the second tree. Again, are you familiar with that photograph of a tree that's been referred to in the document as tree 2?
That's correct, yes.
Now, when you were in a position to examine that area on foot, did you form the view that those trees may have been responsible for the ignition of the Werryberry fire or not?
No, those trees could be discounted as being struck by lightning, just from a number of quick factors, being that the ground underneath was burnt and the tree, after collapsing, which has collapsed a period of time after the fire has moved through, was unburnt, and the internal sections of those trees were charred, and whereas the fracture points were not burnt at all. So therefore we can discount it as being the tree falling at the time of the fire.
And I'll take you to another satellite map image, and this is at page 34 of the OIC Officer in Charge's statement. If we can zoom in on that image, thank you. So here is a satellite map image of two purple icons. Are they two trees?
Yes, they're the two trees that were nominated from the aerial observations.
And then to the right, we have a red flame icon, and that's identified as a plume of smoke.
That's correct, yes.
And then if we return to the trees, there's a blue flag with the distance of 800 metres. Can you explain to the court what that means, please?
Yes, so the one with the 800 metres, the blue flag is another designated lightning strike area. And I was able to rule out that the fire hasn't progressed from that area to the trees, or the fire hasn't started from that area because the distance is too large.
So are you saying that 800 metres is, in your experience, too great a distance to cause the ignition?
That's correct, yes.
Just to return to Exhibit 10A, which is your record of the lightning strike data. On that first page at table 13, there are a number of those references to data to lightning strikes on the 29th, and there are 4 references to lightning strikes all at 1:29 p.m. on the 29th. Can you see those?
Just looking. 29.
They all fall on that second page of the table.
Yes.
Does that mean that there were 4 lightning strikes that all occurred at the same time, that is 1:29 on that day?
Yes, for the minute period. So the period is the location in between that time. There is seconds involved as well, but there's 4 lightning strikes that occurred within that minute period.
And returning to your evidence a few moments ago about the map with the plume of smoke and the lightning strike 200 metres away, is that a reference to one of these strikes on the table? That is the closest one?
Yes, without having that actual data, just bear with me. Which actual one on this table, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly without going back and having to go through all the data to find which one it actually is, which ID number.
But the process you undertook is you've mapped those 4, the ID references to those 4 strikes at 1:29 and identified the closest one, and that is at 200 metres.
That's correct, yes.
If I take you back to your report, Detective Moon. You took a number of photographs of the scene when you were on the ground, including of those two trees, tree 1 and tree 2, that I took you to earlier.
Yes.
Were there any other observations that you made while on the ground that assisted you in making a determination as to the origin of the fire?
Yes, again, as I previously stated, the evidence, and when you look at the trees, the collapsed trees on the ground, we're able to rule out that they were as a result of the lightning strike. For the main factors are that the tree has burnt internally and then collapsed after the integrity of the tree has been compromised. The fallen tree has fallen onto previously burnt ground. If the tree was hit by lightning and a fire commenced, you would have areas under that trunk that would not be fire affected.
In your report, Detective Moon, at the end of page 88, which is paragraph 48, you've determined that the area of origin of the Werryberry fire was determined to be the location of the smoke observed by the RFS aerial patrol, and that's at 4:57 p.m.
Yes, that's correct.
In your experience, can a lightning strike cause a tree or another object to smoulder for a period of time before igniting?
Yes, it can. It depends on the fuel loads that are located around that tree that has been hit by the lightning, or if the lightning actually hits the ground. So it's the available fuel that is located on the ground, and then there's a process for the evolution of that fire.
So in this case, it's your assessment that a few hours have elapsed until that plume of smoke has been observed by the RFS. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you able to give any further indication as to when exactly that tree would have ignited, or you just can't say?
You can't. It would have to ignite or at the time of the lightning strike, because the fire needs to continue on. So you need your heat and your fuel and your oxygen to continue the fire. So therefore, it would be at the point of lightning that there's been sufficient heat there to generate a fire at that location.
Is it possible, in your view, that any of the other fire, I'll withdraw that, lightning strikes in the area, even a day or so before, could be responsible for the ignition of that fire?
No, because we have the evidence that of the RFS aerial crew that saw the plume of smoke is very critical, because there are no other locations or of fire that were observed in that area. So therefore, it can be ascertained that none of the other strikes that occurred in that area did create an actual fire.
Thank you, Detective. Your Honour, those are my questions.
Thank you. Detective, I'll just see if there's any other questions. Mr. Free.
No questions, Your Honour.
Mr. Glascott.
No questions, Your Honour. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Detective.
Thank you.
Your Honour, I call the final witness in this inquiry, and that is Darren Howe.
Mr. Howe, can you see and hear us?
Your Honour, I'm told he's just on the line now or in any moment.
All right.
No? No, he's not, Your Honour. I'm sorry. Just one moment. Sorry, Your Honour, he should make that connection any moment.
No problem. And Mr. Howe's the last witness today, is that right, Ms.
Yes.
Stevens? And then you'll be making some submissions, just so.
I'll foreshadow what the submissions will be in due course, Your Honour,
Yes.
and that will be the evidence for the rest of the day, and we'll
Right.
resume tomorrow.
Thank you, just so people know what's
Yes.
ahead today.
Yes.
While we're waiting, thanks.
I expect we will finish at lunchtime. That is by 1 o'clock.
By 1 o'clock, and then we'll resume again tomorrow at 10
Yes,
after
Your
this witness. Yep, thanks. Mr. Howe, can you see and hear us?
Your Honour, I'm told 1 minute.
It's a long minute.
Mr. Howe, can you see and hear us? We can see you. Yes, there you are.
Yeah.
All right, the court officer's just going to speak to you, Mr. Howe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Howe, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
The oath, thank you.
Silence, please. Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Ms. Stevens.
So will you give your full name to the court, please?
Darren Charles Howe.
And are you a member of the New South Wales RFS?
That's correct.
And can you explain to the court your role with the RFS, both now and at the time of these bushfires?
I'm a deputy captain with my local brigade at Milton. I'm also a deputy captain in a remote area firefighting team for Macarthur, and I'm also an authorised fire investigation for wildfire and structural fires.
And for how long have you undertaken those roles?
I've been a wildland firefighter for 35 years. I've been a wildfire investigator for 11 years, and I've completed 154 wildfire investigations as a lead instructor, and I've completed a lot more investigations as a mentor and also to assist other investigators. I've been a structural fire investigator for 10 years, completed 48 structural fire investigations. I was deployed in 2013 to Tasmania to investigate the wildfires to support the Tasmanian Fire Department. I've been a remote area firefighter for 6 years. I attended the New South Wales Police Arson course at the Police Academy in 2019, and I also attend, when available, regular training sessions with the New South Wales Association of Fire Investigators.
And did you play a role as a fire investigator into a number of the fires in the Black Summer bushfire season?
That's correct.
And does that include investigation into the Werry Berry fire?
That's correct.
Have you provided a report for the purpose of these proceedings that's dated 14th of September 2020?
That's correct.
And Mr. Howe, have you got a copy of that report in front of you?
Yes, I do.
For the purposes of this report, did you attend what you understood to be the area of origin of the Werryberry fire in early February 2020?
I attended the general area of origin to conduct an investigation into the fire.
And was that an aerial examination?
That's correct. At the time, we were only able to have a helicopter. Time was limited, and so we'd done an aerial investigation to see if we could come up with a cause and origin of that Werryberry fire.
And that fire was very much ongoing at the time of your investigation, is that right? I'm sorry, and by that I mean it had joined with the Badger forest fire.
I believe so, yes. I didn't investigate the Badger fire, but I believe so.
Who were you with when you conducted that aerial examination?
I was in Helitech 202, and we had New South Wales police officers Glenn Barry and Ben Walden from the arson squad, plus a pilot and a crewman from the helicopter.
And on that day, Mr. Howe, can you explain to the court your observations of the bushland and the accessibility of that area?
Yeah, well, prior to going out to this site, I spent nearly a day in the fire control centre in the incident management team, getting as much information I can about the fire. I received emails which gave me lats and longs and also GPS readings of where the fire started, and also photos from the raft team and the helicopter that first sighted the fire. So we then went out to that area of that fire to see if we could investigate and find a possible cause of the fire. When we went out there, obviously when you look at a wildfire, there's two types of causes. It can be human or it can be natural. Because of the remote location, we'll be able to eliminate all the human intervention. So we looked at natural causes, and I also had lightning data maps that started from the 27th, which is several days before. And we navigated we done like a grid search pattern to actually look at the area. And we went about 3 or 4 kilometres in each direction from where we had that initial sighting, just to see whether we could locate any possible causes. When we were navigating...
Just pausing there, I'm sorry, Mr. Howe.
Yes.
Just pausing there. I should ask you first, is it your opinion that the cause of this fire was indeed lightning?
That's correct.
When you refer to the lightning strike data,
Yes.
Is that obtained through the RFS, and is it the case that you then map that data onto satellite maps?
We actually have a program called Collector, which is an RFS program where you go in and search the lightning strikes and it pre-maps it for you.
And it's the case that in the days leading up to the observations of the plume of smoke on the 29th, there was significant lightning activity in the area, is that right?
That's correct.
And your understanding of the plume of smoke is from a photograph taken by RFS member Jack Rorty, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you work, as it were, backwards from that location in terms of your examination of the area?
We started from that location, then went in all directions to try and find possible causes.
If I turn to your report, from the area you were in a position to observe surrounding trees and various ridges, and you've taken photographs, and this is on the last 2 pages of your report, Mr. Howe.
Yes.
You've taken photographs of 2 trees, which you've referred to as, well, tree 1 and tree 2. And at the conclusion of your report, you've said, the fire started in a remote area with difficult access. Firefighters accessed the fire by helicopter. You go on to say in your final sentence, after completing my investigation and eliminating all other causes, this fire was determined as being natural, caused by a lightning strike to a tree. Now, pausing there, my question is, you're not in a position to say that it was one of those two trees that was the ignition point, are you?
That's correct.
Your evidence is that it was lightning that caused the fire, and it was lightning to a tree. Is it fair to say in the vicinity of that plume of smoke?
Yes, that's correct, because the tree could have been consumed by the fire. Therefore, there would be no evidence of that lightning strike. These are just examples of lightning strikes within that general area of origin that we found.
I'll just ask you some questions about the lightning strike data. I'll bring up a satellite map image on the screen, and this is at page 34 of the Officer in Charge's statement. Just one moment, Mr. Howe, and I'll show you a satellite map. If we zoom into that map, perhaps just a little bit more if that's possible. Mr. Howe, can you see that image?
Yes, I can.
This is a satellite map that's been created by Detective Gregory Moon. Now, you've seen his report, is that right?
That's correct.
And if you take it from me that those various blue flags are the lightning strikes that have been mapped across the area on the 29th of December, and the red dot is the location of the plume of smoke. And now I'll take you to another image, and that is at page 33 of the Officer in Charge's statement. Sorry, Mr. Howell, it appears we're trying to locate it.
That's all right.
My question will be in one moment. Did you go through any similar exercise in terms of mapping the lightning strikes on the area as shown in the map I just displayed?
In my report, on the second page, the map that I pulled from the New South Wales RFS collector shows the lightning data strikes between the 27th of the 12th and the 29th of the 12th.
Perhaps we'll bring that one up now. It appears it's been difficult to bring up that other map, but I'll deal with it with your map, Mr. Howe.
Okay.
We zoom in to that map. Have you identified the area of the plume of smoke in that map, Mr. Howe?
No, I haven't, because this was actually taken prior to me going out on site. So we had GPS location, so we identified the plume by the GPS location given to us by Jake Rowley.
I see. So you haven't been in a position to map in any detail the particular strikes on, say, 27, 28 and 29 of February as compared with the plume?
That's correct.
I'll show you a final map on this issue, and that's at page 35 of the Officer in Charge's statement. You may have seen this image before, Mr. Howe. It's one of the satellite map photographs referred to in Detective Moon's statement. I'll withdraw that report.
Yes.
And you may have heard the evidence before that the red dot is, again, the plume of smoke, and the blue flag that's 200 metres is the nearest lightning strike to the plume of smoke on the 29th of December.
Yes.
Is it likely that due to that proximity, that lightning strike is the most likely strike responsible for the ignition of the tree that caused that plume of smoke?
Without getting on the ground, I wouldn't be able to say yes to that. But if the court would allow me, can I just read out of National Fire Protection Association Guide to Fire and Explosion Investigations in regarding to lightning, just to, because lightning to me is just a guide to a heat source that was in that area. Can I just read a short passage of that?
Certainly.
In reference to lightning, it just says lightning causes fires may smoulder undetected for several weeks after a lightning strike before conditions change and the fire transition to an active wildfire. It's not uncommon for lightning. It's not uncommon to go back even 14 days to look for a lightning strike that might smoulder away for that period of time until the weather conditions change and the fire actually goes from a smouldering stage to a flaming stage. So I can't say that lightning strike on that day was the one that caused it, but I can say that location was where the fire was first sighted, or where the smoke was first sighted.
Your evidence in your report refers to evidence of lightning strikes on the 27th, 28th and 29th of December, is that right?
That's correct.
And there were numerous strikes on each of those days in the general area of the Werriberry Mountain.
That's correct.
So is your evidence simply that you can't, in any more detail, identify a particular strike that's responsible for the ignition of this fire?
That's correct. I can't give you the origin, but I can say the cause was most likely a lightning strike.
Do you consider it's likely that the lightning strike struck between the 27th and the 29th?
Unless I was standing on the ground when that happened, I couldn't say yes to that.
Thank you, Your Honour. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Howe, there may be some other questions. Mr. Free?
No questions, Your Honour.
Mr. Glascott?
Questions, thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Howe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. That concludes the evidence in this inquiry. There's one minor administrative matter. At the outset, I attended this lightning strike data bundle, and I was incorrect about the numbering of the exhibit. If the entire brief for the Werryberry fire could be or should be Exhibit 10A,
Yes.
this document has been inserted into that exhibit already, so it doesn't need its own exhibit number. So that was my error.
So the Werryberry brief is 10A.
Yes, and that's all the evidence that Your Honour needs in regard to this inquiry.
All right, thank you.
Your Honour now has the benefit of the documentary material contained in Exhibit 10A and the oral testimony from Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley, Detective Senior Sergeant Gregory Moon, RFS Fire Investigator Darren Howe, and RFS members Jake Rorty and John Inschip. Your Honour, at a later stage of this inquiry, those assisting Your Honour will formally address you on the cause and origin of the Werryberry fire. In this regard, I can foreshadow that that formal submission is likely to be made that the origin of the Werryberry fire was in the general area of where the plume of smoke was detected in the afternoon of the 29th of December 2019, and the cause of the fire was a lightning strike in the day or days preceding those observations.
Thank you, Ms Stevens.
Your Honour, may I formally stand this matter over to the 5th of September next year, as has been the case with those other matters before the court?
Yes, I do that now. Thank you, Ms Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honour.
That's the end of the proceedings today, and so we'll adjourn now until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.